Right, hello everyone. It's Friday. I wasn't up to making a video yesterday, but back on the old wagon today. It's warmish but very grey. It was even worse yesterday. It actually was raining all day, so it wasn't a particularly great day in far northern Queensland. But again, at least I'm not living in Melbourne. That's always something that's worthwhile. The actual lead story today is a group of 200 doctors, scientists and teachers who are actually questioning the official story that the Swedes are giving about how they've overcome the coronavirus. And I've got a few questions to ask of them, to be quite frank. One of them is actually an ex-Aussie who's been over there for 10 years, and he was at one stage an epidemiologist, and he studied at the University of Queensland, and he issued a tweet out to a YouTuber accusing people that are against the demolishment of a botanist's statue in Sweden, and he called them right-wing extremists. So this guy, David Steadson, and he had his Swedish flag at half-mast, worried because he was to commemorate the deaths in Sweden. Claims that they've basically bungled the whole thing, and I think actually when it comes down to it, I think him and his group of stirrers are basically left-wing ideologues, and they're just basically not happy about the fact that Sweden has had a laissez-faire attitude, which is more free market, in other words, creating the herd mentality. It's against their whole ethos of left-wing thinking. And I think that's more to that is behind this particular group trying to put down the way Sweden's handled things. So that's just my take on it anyway. Talking in particular about schools staying open rather than closing, causing the problems. I don't know about it. I still understand that because kids are actually the least likely to actually get the virus. Sure, they could probably spread it, and I guess that's the point they're making. But I come back to the point that David should know better, living in Sweden, that there's actually a place called Malmö, which is high concentration of migrants, and that is where most of these cases probably came from. I know certainly a large proportion of them did, and that is unique to Sweden because they've opened their borders to so many migrants that now they have these huge enclaves of migrants, and they just don't follow the rules that the rest of the Swedes do. So therefore you're going to get that spike, especially initially in cases. So trying to compare Sweden to other countries as if every country is the same is ridiculous in itself. Every country has its own circumstance, and you need to take that into account if you're looking at the number of deaths involved. So, you know, like I say, I think he's a classic left-wing academic, and not only that, apparently he's pushing Amway. I mean, God, I think David's credibility could be called into question on this. And the next story is about good old Anastacia, the Premier of Queensland. This may seem fairly trivial, I must admit that, but the Liberals have pointed out that Anastacia attended a funeral even though she wasn't feeling that well. She said she just lost her voice, but she had problems with a respiratory issue. And given the advice that she's given to other people, it's if you have any health issues at all, you should get yourself tested for corona. She didn't do that. She'd got a test for corona after the funeral, which is totally irresponsible, going on her own guidelines. I think what this actually points out is that these leaders, they come up with these draconian edicts of the way you need to act as a normal person, and they're very difficult to follow. And in the case of Anastacia, she's done it herself. She's done a Pelosi, in effect. Nancy Pelosi going to the hairdresser. That's just the same sort of thing. These people don't follow their own guidelines, and they're total hypocrites. And if you're going to have hard-ass guidelines, sure, they're difficult to follow, but you should have to go through the same loops that everybody else does. But do know Anastacia is basically pandering to the elite. She's happy to have AFL footballers and celebrities come in without any great scrutiny. It's a very corrupt government in Queensland, and I really think it's time for a change. The next story is quite surprising because it comes initially from the Washington Post, plus a few other publications. But the Washington Post is talking about the draconian lockdown in Melbourne being probably the toughest in the world. And yet the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, who's quite woke as a corporate exec. He's a guy who's very politically correct, but he's actually he's coming down hard against the Andrews government, as are a number of other publications from the US, according to news.com.au. And they're quite shocked at the way the Victorian police is acting towards the public. So it's not just within Australia. Internationally, dictator Dan is really taking a basting, and he deserves to. I mean, it's just right over the top what's happening in this country, and people like Daniel Andrews need to be called to account. And if you look at the figures with Victoria, it's 70. They've got 75% of the corona cases and 90% of the deaths, and that is a total fail on any level. So dictator Dan has really stuffed up. We know he's stuffed up with the quarantine at that hotel. That was an absolute fiasco. And he's allowed Black Lives Matter marches, and surprised he hasn't let other types of marches take place that are politically correct and left-wing. But that was bad enough, just doing the Black Lives Matter, which is a very discredited organisation, has now been overtaken by hardcore Marxists. And violent Marxists at that. There's a lot of violence in the US under the banner of Black Lives Matter. So it's not an organisation I think any democratically elected person should be involved with. Yeah, one of the figures that they've actually quoted from these overseas publications is that Melburnians have been confined in their places for 115 days, as opposed to 92 days in Manila in the Philippines, and 76 days in Wuhan, China, where it all started, and 58 days in Italy, which also was one of those flashpoints because they had that connection with China with the fashion industry, and then finally down to New Zealand with only 33 days, which is interesting because New Zealand, I thought was really hard-assed, but maybe not quite as hard-assed as I thought. Remember, in New Zealand, you can actually fly overseas without having to get permission from the government. Not so in Australia. We are becoming more draconian than New Zealand the way things are going, which is not a good look. And lastly, it's good old Jeanette Young, the Chief Medical Officer of Queensland, someone I love to hate. And Jeanette Young's done it again. This time there's the youngest COVID-19 victim, Nathan Turner. I think he was in his around 30 years of age, maybe even younger, I'm not sure, but I got it up on screen. He died, they said, because of corona, and his relatives had to go into quarantine because of that. His fiance and family had to go into quarantine, and then it transpires that the Jeanette Young and her cronies had discovered that Nathan Turner had actually tested negative to Corona-19 3 days before they finally leaked that information out to the public. So they allowed the closest relatives of Nathan to suffer in quarantine when they should have been bereaving his death, and also basically led to a panic in the town that Nathan came from. But of course they don't give a stuff. They're just bureaucrats, and they do things on their own timescale. It doesn't matter what happens to the public in the meantime if panic ensues. I think in a way it's a window into how these people think and how they can use panic to their advantage to improve their power. The trouble is, I think in this case, Jeanette Young with Palaszczuk, they're both going to go down, because I really can't see Labor winning the election the way things are panning out, because it just sees as a disaster virtually every day regarding COVID-19 in Queensland, the way it's been handled. So it's got to be a political negative, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I am hopeful that Labor gets their ass kicked. I'm quite happy to admit that. But I do believe that they are on the nose, and I will be surprised if they do sneak back in. And they'll be just sneaking back in at the best, I think. So I'm hoping for a big backlash. So I can keep my fingers crossed, I guess. Yeah, that's pretty well it, except for the fact that there's another freedom rally that's been proposed for Melbourne. These rallies will not stop until Daniel Andrews substantially reduces the lockdowns in Melbourne. So I think clashes between protesters and police will be on the agenda for several weeks or months, depending when Andrews finally loosens his titanic grip on this state, which he's basically turned into an absolute economic basket case. And that was one of the things that was cited in one of those US magazines, saying that the consumer demand was down 30%, and that and basically the Victoria's dragging the whole of Australia down, which it is. It's going to be an anchor on the whole economy, and we can blame one man really. It's Daniel Andrews. He's totally bungled the corona lockdowns that he has had, and now his response is to make even more draconian measures to punish the Melburnians who haven't actually done that much wrong. It's been the bloody the government who's bungled, not the people. I mean, they've made some people have done stupid things, of course, that's bound to happen, but overall it is the government who's responsible for how bad things are in Victoria. It's no surprise that Victoria has the most cases, the most deaths by far, and it's run by a hard left government. I think it's pretty well illustrative. You don't have to be a genius to join the dots on that one. Okay, well, that's the end of this video. I hope everybody's feeling well and okay, and it would be really nice if you could subscribe to the channel and give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, and make comments if you disagree with what I'm saying, or you have something that could add to the information that I've got. I'm not the font of all knowledge, I never purport to be, but I'm trying to be as honest as I can and to give people a fairly balanced view of what's going on in the world. So that's basically the position I come from. I don't want to go to the lowest common denominator. I don't want to just go for sensationalism. I'm looking for truth, basically, so I hope I achieved that. And I hope you guys keep supporting me, because you've been great so far, and I really appreciate it. So onward and upward to the 600 subscriber mark. We'll see if we can get there. If one of these recent videos goes viral as well, I might get another 10% boost. You never know. But look, have a great day. I hope it's not as grey where you are as it is here. And we've got the weekend coming up, so there's always something to look forward to. So goodbye today, and I'll catch you tomorrow.